Motivation versus discipline. I'm gonna get straight into it. I'm gonna give you more of the practicality aspect. We're gonna peel back the layers, so to speak. So let's start first with an analogy of what motivation discipline is. So I want you to imagine motivation as and pardon me for my bad illustrating here. I'm gonna have words to indicate what it is. Motivation is like a spark. Okay, just imagine this is like I don't know, a spark. Okay, discipline is like uh, bad illustrating here. It is like the fuel. Okay, one's the spark, one's the fuel. So the first question you're probably asking, like, which comes first? It's kind of like the question does, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? And I will say a lot of people think that discipline is something that you just have, right? It's just something that you start off with, right? When you make a decision, when you start something new, a lot of people think you start off with discipline and then you either lose it or you still maintain it or have it. And that's just not how it works. I want you to think of discipline as a higher level skill, okay? So both of these things are skills, okay? Motivation is a skill and discipline is a skill. Why? Well, they both can be trained. Okay, they both can be improved. They both go through a process of learning, trial and error, and really figuring out what works best for you. And that is something that can be trained, right? Just like almost everything that we teach you here in the academy, right? We teach you the skills, the step-by-step process of, gaining the XP to improve and upgrade your skills and of course introduce the activities that are going to teach you new skills, right? So this is if this is something that you feel like I don't have one or the other or both, well, it's just simply a skill that we must train, right? And we're going to get deep into how we can actually train these skills and rely on both of them to maximize the benefits when it comes to our intellect skill tree, right? The mindset part. Because basically these two skills are in our intellect. I'll put this at the top just as a reminder. These are both in our intellect skill tree here. And this is one of the big reasons why um I even got started with helping other people. Um just so you all may or may not know, I was one of the most unmotivated people like growing up. I only liked doing like two things, and that's playing video games and hanging out with people like my friends or something and doing something fun. That's it. And if it's not, if it has anything to do with anything other than that, I was very unmotivated. I had to kind of teach myself motivation. I had to teach myself how to get into, sports. You know, um, I played football, I played basketball, I played all these different sports, and I had to teach myself, how to motivate myself to even want to do these things, right? And break the cycle of just being a gamer, right? And the reason why I wanted to share that with you is, you know, you aren't born with motivation. You know, you're not supposed to just naturally have it. It's something that you truly do have to develop and train. So, if motivation is like a spark, right? If we were to kind of associate it with like a fire, right? So, if we were to connect the fuel and the fire, or the fuel and the spark, we get a fire, right? And I always say you have to keep your fire going, right? And that's pretty much the you could think of it as like this your warrior spirit, right? It's this fire that's inside of you, that's built inside of you naturally, you know, through uh, hundreds and hundreds of years of being a human being, right? Um, as human beings, we have these fight or flight systems. We have hormones. We have all these things that are inside of our body, you know, when they're born. But what kind of controls these things is the spark and the fuel, and especially if we want to give it direction, right? So just think that you will never have a fire that's completely out. Okay. There is always a fire inside you. It's just how bright it is burning. So, the point of what I'm saying is that these are not on and off switches. And that's if there's one big takeaway from motivation and discipline is that it's not an on and off switch. Think of it as a dimmer, like a dim switch where you can kind of adjust the brightness to high or low. But there's always power, there's always fire burning for both of these switches. Okay? So, to answer one of your questions, Danny, is you mentioned that it doesn't feel like you have them both, but you do. Again, it's not an on or off switch. You don't turn it on or turn it off. You are motivated and disciplined in a lot of different things in your life. But the big thing is we want to figure out how to do that in one direction, right? Specifically your health and fitness, whether that's training, nutrition, um, in those particular areas. It's just giving it focus, giving it direction, and being able to control that dimmer switch or improve that skill. So if you made it onto the call today, for example, you are motivated, right? You had that spark, right? And that spark was fueled by something, right? Something that either the topic of discussion this week, or even just showing up consistently week after week, which is a form of discipline, right? Or even if you just wanted to learn something new or see my face, right? Something fueled that spark, something got you to be here today. So therefore, you just demonstrated motivation and discipline, right? Or combination of both of them, right? And something that you mentioned as well in your question is, you know, motivation is something that you do, it's not something that you have. And that's one thing that I want to talk about in the motivation side as we focus on motivation. So I'm going to write that down over here. So motivation is something that we do, it's not something that we have. Now, why is that? What does that even mean, right? Like, what do you mean you do it? You do motivation? Like what? What's that? Well, if you want to dive super deep into this topic, even further beyond today's conversation, I highly recommend you go on YouTube or look up or go into the book that I recommend here in the academy, which is High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard. The way that he breaks down and explains motivation is so powerful, it's so relatable, it's so easy. I highly recommend for your continued education beyond this conversation to dive deeper into this motivation topic because he's an expert at this. Um, and the when it comes to the difference between having motivation as something that you have and do is really understanding what is it, right? And a lot of people think that motivation is this feeling and this feeling of like either excitement, energy, um, or even something like action, right? But all of those things are different, right? There's a difference between feeling and doing, right? Because you could feel a lot of things, right? We have so many feelings, we have so many thoughts, we have over 60,000, thoughts a day, and there's just so much going on with feelings, like they go up and down, and motivation, again, from my experience, working with warriors and myself, is I also fell victim of the feeling trap. Okay. And the big takeaway for this is that, is it a feeling or is it a result of a feeling? So for example, let's say you have energy, right? You have energy, maybe you had a coffee, maybe you woke up, maybe it's sunny, maybe you got some good news for the day, and now all of a sudden you're like, wow, I feel great. I'm gonna go to the gym now, right? Is it the feeling that generates the motivation, or is it the action that in response to that feeling? Let me know in the chat. In regards to going to the gym, is it the feeling that's the motivation, or is it the reaction to the feeling? It's a great question. Let me hop in the chat. Nice, Dan. You got the audiobook? Ooh, that's my preferred version. Love the audiobook. Is it the feeling or is it the response? Well, a lot of people think it's a feeling. It's the feeling, right? The reason why people think it's the feeling is because they think it's something that they need to have. So if you don't have that feeling of energy, positivity, positive expectancy, whatever that may be, then people think they don't have motivation. But that's not true, right? It's a response to that feeling. Because when you have energy, right, when you have this positive, positive thinking, whatever that may be, then you are more inclined to take more positive action, right? As opposed to when we slept 2 hours, right? And then now you have low energy. Now you are, more hungry because your leptin levels and hormones are out of whack, right? You lack the mental clarity of brain fog, and then now you're like, I don't know, I'm just not focused. I don't know what to do, yada yada, and you start to make excuses, right? But it's the response to those feelings that you're having throughout the day that determines on whether or not have motivation, essentially, right? But it's really the action in response to that, right? If there's no action taken at all in response to those feelings, right? Is does that count as being motivated or unmotivated? Well, choosing to do nothing is a choice, right? Therefore, if you choose to not take action, you could then shift that from motivation being a feeling to motivation being an action. So if you don't take action, you can say, I'm not motivated, right? But if you do take action, then you could say, you are motivated. So it's a matter of perspective, right? Again, feeling or action. And if you associate motivation with a feeling, then you're going to have less control, right? Because your feelings can go up and down. I could stub my toe and have this feeling of discomfort. Does that mean my motivation is now down? Or do I not have it to now go outside for a run? You know? Or or am I going to associate with an action of being like, hey, I'm not motivated until I put on my shoes, right? I grab my water bottle, I go outside, I start my workout on my watch, and I'm going through that process of generating motivation, which brings me to how we define or how we our perspective, at least that infinite of motivation. And again, you could dive super deep into this with uh, an, Brendan Burchard's perspective because we do definitely share similarities to that by diving into his book. But imagine motivation as like not just a spark, but I'm going to see if I can draw something like this. Think of it as like a power plant. Okay. A power plant has to generate energy, right? And that is the closest thing of what motivation is, right? It's a power plant where you have to generate energy. So let's go back to that original question. Is it a feeling or is it an action? Well, what is energy? What is energy? Is energy a feeling or is it an action? Drop it in the chat. I'm curious. Drop it in the chat. Danny says neither. Danny, you mentioned you don't use a feeling to trigger the response. Then what does? Energy is a physical state. Okay. Any other responses? Mark, Olia? We were talking about feelings and actions. What about energy? How do you describe energy? Is it more of a feeling or is it more of an action? Olia says action. Mark says, I feel energized when it's there, so I'm going to say feeling. Cool. All different answers. And I like that. I really do. So, what is it? Feeling or action? Well, it's both. It's a combination of both and even other things as well. But you can kind of boil it down into two kind of categories. Feeling and action, right? A great example is coffee, right? You drink coffee. It's supposed to be the magical energy source for a lot of people, right? And when you drink coffee, right, what occurs? Well, you have more energy. Well, this what kind of energy? Well, you have more mental alertness. In physical training, you have more explosive power, right? And for some people who overdo it on the caffeine, they start to get jittery, right? Like caffeine jitters. But these are all kind of actions, right? They it's an action response to the caffeine. But caffeine is also a mask, right? It's a temporary mask of what's going on the inside, right? That's why people who suffer from sleep deprivation, insomnia, all these other things kind of escape to caffeine, but at the end of the day, physiologically, hormonally, everything going on the inside, these kind of things on physiological level are still in place, right? So mentally and physically, they're both kind of interconnected. The feeling of having energy and the actions that you take are both very, very similar. But to kind of really go into the motivation area, why are people more motivated when they do consume caffeine, right? Well, it's a combination of the feeling that they have when they are consuming caffeine. I feel great, focused, energized, and then also the action that they take in response to it. So, again, if you were to not have caffeine, does that mean you now don't have motivation? For some people, they might say yes, right? Oh, I can't do anything with caffeine, without caffeine, right? Or, oh, I can't drink caffeine. It doesn't make me feel good, right? So, again, is motivation something that we have, right? So if I don't have caffeine, I guess I'm not motivated, right? That's not the case. Reason why is because of the power plant. There is a lot of ways that you could generate motivation from both feelings and actions. So, for example, you can break down these feelings into positive and negative, right? For a lot of people, for example, caffeine generates a lot of positive feelings, lots of positivity, right? But for others, it's a lot of negative, right? For others, it increases their anxiety. For others, it makes their stomach, feel, go into a knot and things like that. So there's these positive and negative feelings, but you can still respond to these positive and negative feelings or emotions with action. Another great example is one of the biggest reasons why I even went down the path of helping other people, focusing on health and fitness and the value of health and fitness was my dad. And if you haven't heard the story, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer and ended up beating it. But there were a lot of negative feelings around that, right? There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of anxiety. There's all of these negative feelings. But I turned those negative feelings into motivation. I transformed it. I used the power plant to generate the energy to fuel that motivation, right? So there's a lot of positive ways and negative ways to generate energy, but at the end of the day, if I did nothing with those negative or positive feelings, I would not have had any motivation. And that's why the action component is so important. It's a response, right? In turn-based combat, right? In like games like Final Fantasy, you have to kind of respond, attack, or defend, right? But there's really is no in between if you're in a battle, right? I mean, you could flee, you could like run away, but I guess you could classify that as doing nothing, right? You could escape the battle, run away. But at the end of the day, you have to take an action, right? And that's why this all connects to it being something that you do, not something that you have. So again, it's a response of whether that's physically or mentally to these feelings, both positive or negative, that you can generate in this power plant. There are some days where I'm focused on more positive things than negative, right? There are some days where I'm more focused on the negative things than the positive, right? What are the risks of not showing up to the gym today, right? What am I sacrificing by not taking action, right? That might spark some negative feelings like, oh, I'm going to feel this way. I'm going to look this way. I'm going to fail. I'm going to have to go through that feeling of failure, right? Or on some days, I look at the positive. I'm going to feel great when I check off my workout and I feel fulfilled when I get to continue my streak, and I'm gonna feel so good 3 months down the road when it's 70, 80 degrees outside and I'm on a beach and I have my shirt off and I'm gonna feel good in my own skin and things like that, right? It can be, like I said, feelings can go up and go down. They could be positive or negative, but it's a response, it's the action. And that action is what creates that spark so that you generate the motivation. So now, where does discipline come into this? Right? And again, we could dive so much deeper on just motivation, but I really want to also get to that discipline component. If you want to dive deeper into this, again, I highly recommend diving into the motivation section of the high performance habits. But on the discipline side here, so how does discipline work then? Right? Well, again, it's not like an on and off switch, right? This power plant is constantly operating in the motivation department. There are things that you're motivated in, and there's things that you're not motivated in, right? Otherwise, we would just be literally standing here like this, right? There's a reason why I pick up my water bottle and drink it. I'm motivated to drink water, right? There's a reason why you all are here on the call. But there's a reason why many of you are here week after week, right? That is where the discipline comes in. And a lot of discipline is driven through consistency. And something that I really, really want to get across to you all here. This is so important. A lot of people think that if they're not consistent, they're no longer disciplined. So, what most people think, as an example of discipline, is they think, all right, this is what it's got to look like, perfection, not missing a single day of anything, doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. Yes, that is a form of discipline, but this is also, we call this example one. Let's look at example two. This is also another form of discipline. Boom, 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 boom. This is also a form of discipline because if you look at it through a long period of time, you just did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 out of the 13 possible things, right? You took action 10 times. Whether that's every single day, if that's how you define discipline as doing something every single day, sure. If you miss a day, that's going to be super hard on you, you know? And this is where a lot of people get demoralized. And it really hurts their long-term progressions because when they focus on something like this in example one and they miss a day, now everything is broken. Oh, I'm not disciplined anymore. Oh no, I missed my day. And it completely affects the other side of the equation, which is the spark, the motivation. So now they have to generate the discipline all over again. And that type of like approach to discipline is so unsustainable, right? Because if you have to show up to every single session, whether that's a workout, whether that's, you know, eating consistently the same thing every day, and then you miss a day, then you can start to develop this all or nothing approach, right? But if you look at discipline as a series of strategic actions that you're taking consistently over a long period of time, and you start to redefine what consistency is, right? Instead of making it as something you have to do every day, is something that you do majority of the week or the month that you can improve in over time, then now it's a tool rather than a crutch. And I see this all the time psychologically is you have someone who's going to the gym religiously, hasn't missed a session, then they miss a session. Now they're like whole entire belief system is like changed. Now they start to be like, ah, if I missed this today, then I can miss tomorrow or the next day, or I can miss next week too, you know, and they completely start to change their behavior. So, in my opinion, I think example three is one of the best forms of generating discipline because that's the other side of it, right? We talked about generating motivation, so let's talk about generating discipline. In my opinion, instead of discipline being example one, doing 100 things in a row, in my opinion, I think discipline starts with this, taking one action. And then it evolves to this, taking two actions, back to back, boom, boom. And then it can look something like taking action, maybe missing it, taking action again, and then doing it again. And then it kind of goes into something like this. And it evolves over time. It's something that you develop over time, right? Because as you start, for example, getting results by taking certain action, you're going to want to keep doing the action again, right? Like that's why a lot of people are very, very disciplined with caffeine intake, right? They can kind of know the feelings that they're going to get, right? Or the reaction or the result of consuming caffeine, right? So they do it again every single day, almost like religiously. And then when they don't have it, when they hit those X marks right here, you best believe that next day they're most likely doing the action again. They're going to be like, I'm going to make sure I have my coffee because yesterday was a disaster, right? So you could be disciplined doing things that, can be supporting you on your goals or not. And this goes deep into the psychology of why we do start, stop, and continue, right? Think of this as, what are the things that I am disciplined doing that I want to continue doing? What are the things that are actually helping me get closer to my goals? You know, and then you can also ask, what are the things that I'm disciplined doing that aren't really helping me get closer to my goals that I need to stop doing? And then what are the things that I'm not disciplined doing that I could start doing to get closer to my goals? Right. And again, this is something that you want to train and develop because sometimes discipline is just taking the action and following through with what you say you're going to do and then doing that again and then trying to do that more frequently, right? So there's a component of it when it comes to frequency improving over time, right? Because if we think this is the only form of discipline, then this is where you kind of can sit in this area of being like, I'm not disciplined because discipline doesn't look like this, right? I missed my workout yesterday. I'm not disciplined, but that's just not the case. So part of it is shifting your perspective of what discipline is, right? And how you define it and the weight that you give it, and also considering the other side of it which is motivation, right? Because both are required, right? Both are required. When you miss that workout, right? When you mess up your streak or when discipline now is no longer there, right? That is where motivation comes in, right? That motivation to bounce back after that missed session, right? That missed workout, right? the motivation to come back after you had a bad eating day the next day, right? Maybe you had a event or a birthday party and you had cake, you had cookies, you had all this, right? Again, discipline could have been avoiding those things. And that next day, that's where motivation has to come in so that you can take that action the next day, the action that's going to drive progress and results. And then you use that to fuel the discipline to do that the next day after that, right? So that you're not constantly going back and forth and going back into that behavior that isn't serving you, right? Because again, if you define discipline as the thing you have to do every single day, no matter what, it's like, yes, but you have to give yourself some grace, right? Because just because you missed the day doesn't mean that's going to define your whole entire progress, right? It's about developing it and increasing and improving that skill over time with action in general fueled by motivation so that it could then you can add more fuel to that fire with consistency to keep you going, preferably with an actual tangible result that you can either feel, you can see, and so on and so forth when it comes to fitness in particular. So, motivation versus discipline, which is better, which is worse? Like I said, they're both important. It's like the whole chicken and egg kind of question. They're both important. Um, and in my opinion, motivation and discipline are equally important because you need both of them at certain times throughout the day. So if you're not taking action, that is an indicator that motivation is something you should be focusing on. And then if you're not consistently taking action, then that's when discipline comes into the equation. And there's a lot of people that I've been able to support throughout, my almost dang near 15 years of doing this. I've met people who are highly disciplined, um, but are not motivated. And again, just because you're disciplined doesn't mean you're disciplined with the right things, right? Um, because you could be taking action, but if it's you're not open to taking new action, right? Then that's a motivation thing, right? Then on the other side of the spectrum, I have the people who was just so excited to do things one or two times. Like, boom, new thing, new action. Oh, I could do that all the time. New recipe, new this, new workout, new sleep schedule, new this, but nothing can stick, right? So I hope our conversation today kind of opens up the spectrum a little bit as far as like what motivation discipline is, how do they work, what's a different perspective on how they work, and how can you look at these things differently when it comes to leveraging those feelings that you might have on a day-to-day basis and turning that into action, like the power plant, creating those sparks that could continue to light the fire, and then going on the other side of discipline and knowing that it's not this thing that you have to do from the get-go every single day, or you have it or you don't, right? It's something that you want to develop over time, and that you have to leverage both of these to generate the energy, take the action on a consistent basis over time. So Motivation and discipline. Interested in hearing everybody's thoughts in the chat. Let me know. Let me know if you have any questions on what we covered. Hop in the chat here. All right, let me catch up. Catch up. Danny mentioned, I think the reason I don't understand is because just because I have energy doesn't mean I am motivated. Absolutely. It's a so it's kind of like the I don't know if I answered this by the way, like I'm going back. You let me know if I answer this or not. But it's kind of like the example of coffee, right? Like just because you drink caffeine doesn't mean you're gonna have the same response from caffeine as everybody else, right? It's what you do with the caffeine in response to that, right? Because there's people who could drink caffeine at 12 o'clock at night and like not feel or do anything in response to that feeling, right? So it's like one of those things where it's like just like you said, just because you have energy doesn't mean you're going to use that energy or use that positive feeling of energy to drive action. It's just a gateway, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to respond with action in order to generate the energy, right? So I could drink caffeine now and then not go to the gym or do anything. I got to sit at my desk all day, right? So it's really a response to having that energy, and it's that action and that action of that feeling that you have, you know. But one thing I can tell you is that people who genuinely have higher energy are the ones that are more active because they are more inclined to act on that extra energy, right? They're more inclined to move, right? They're more inclined to be more talkative, right? So there's a lot of uh, intricacies when it comes to behavior and psychology when it comes to energy. But you can also look at the people who have lower energy generally, right? They take less action. They generally are less motivated, right? And this is very, very common amongst men, for example. Men who have generally like lower testosterone, right? They have generally the feeling of lower energy, and that lower energy doesn't motivate them to go to the gym, for example. So, again, just because you have energy doesn't mean that you are motivated. It's what you do in response to that energy, the action, that basically is fueling that. So it's think of energy as the gateway. If that makes sense. Earlier, you mentioned when I'm not drinking enough water, not moving, and not eating well, I feel all can't I don't know why, but I can't read that word. Sore sorry? I don't know. All sort of issues, I think, to start to arise in my body. Me, why is not to my why is not to feel like hot trash. Even though eating treats and not moving my body seem to be the more comfortable things in the short term. The discomfort of starting to train and adjust a diet is certainly uncomfortable, but the long-term benefits absolutely outweigh the instant gratification. Yeah, totally. And I think that's really, really important when it comes to the both the motivation and discipline side, right? Because you can't get the long term delayed gratification without discipline, right? And then you can't escape the instant gratification with motivation, right? Because that essentially is why you're taking action now, right? Is you ideally want to take action now for that kind of long-term benefit in a way, but most people take action for that immediate response. So it's again having the awareness of both of these things, and that's why they're both important, right? It's not only about delayed gratification, right? It's not only about where you want to be a year, 10 years from now, right? It's like, yeah, that's important, but what's going to drive action today and tomorrow and the next day and next week, right? Sometimes we need to have both that push and that pull. Think of it as the yin and the yang. Motivation, discipline, like the yin and the yang, in a way. Danny says, still don't really know what this all means in regards to what to do to make all this happen. Maybe I missed some things. Then what drives the action? Um, yeah, I think I covered that. If not, the thing that drives the action is, like I mentioned in the motivation section, is those feelings, the positive and negative feelings that are driven by, you know, where you are now, how you're feeling now, or how you're feeling later, both positive or negative, right? So there's that side of it again, like my story about my dad, right? There was a lot of negative emotions, right? That's what drove um action for me. Those negative feelings, fear, anxiety, stress, all those different things. I chose to respond, right? It's about um, a choice that you make, right? You have to make a choice. And making no choice is a choice, right? Because I could have had these feelings, right? Negative or positive, and I could feel these things, but I could choose to act on them or not, right? And you have to kind of look at it from a long-term perspective, right? What's going to happen if I choose to take action, right? And what's going to happen if I choose to not take action, right? At the end of the day, you have control of how you react to these feelings or these emotions at the end of the day. There's no one else that can make that for you. You're the only one in control of the choices that you make. So I made the choice, for my example, to do something about, my negative situation. I could have made the choice to do nothing and wallow and just sit in my sorrow. And I thought about that and I made that choice for for a while, actually, especially after getting the news. I was paralyzed. I didn't want to do anything, you know. But then I realized it was not helping my situation at all. And this was not going to lead me down a path. It was going to lead me down a path of fear, stress, and anxiety for the rest of my life, you know? And I chose to do something about it. I had to make the choice. So at the end of the day, it's a choice. So that bridge, again, that gateway, it's leveraging energy, positive or negative energy, and it's what you do in response to those things. And just know that you're always making a choice with everything that you do. There's always a choice being made, and not making a choice is a choice. So think sit on that, bite on that a little bit. And of course, feel free to dive deeper into much, much more deeper context inside high performance habits. Brendan Burchard, um, and his story is so powerful. He has a very powerful story of how he was able to figure this out in a somewhat similar way as me, in a way, in its own uniqueness. But let me finish up the rest of these messages. Olia, you said your text turned tiny. I was still able to read it, fortunately. Danny, you mentioned the choice is the problem. Um, Olio, you mentioned Danny. Do you have any reasons in particular for wanting to focus on health and fitness? Danny, you mentioned I need to. I don't want diabetes, and I don't like what I see in the mirror. Yeah, that's those are both like those negative feelings, right? For a lot of people, you can ask them, why are you working out? Why are you so disciplined? Why are you so motivated? Or how were you able to achieve these amazing feats or this great body or, whatever that may be? And I guarantee it's probably a combination of both positive and negative feelings, right? I know for me, I share very similar. I When I started my fitness journey, I was looking in the mirror and I didn't even know who I was, right? And I had that moment of realization of like, I don't want to be this person anymore. Like I don't want to look in the mirror anymore and be dissatisfied with who I see, right? Both physically and mentally. And I let that be one of my motivators to take action, right? Because every time I saw a mirror, I was reminded of that feeling, and I'm like, I'm gonna do something about it. And it was much harder for me back then because I didn't know what to do. Right? There was a million things I could do. But of course, me building Infinite, like I figured out all the great things that you can do, right? Whether that's physically, mentally, nutritionally, like I had to teach myself these things and that took years. But for, all of you warriors here, you know, you have all the tools, right? It's just, you know, uh making a choice to do something, right? And then optimizing and improving from there, right? And fortunately, I don't give you too many tools to play around with, right? Like this is a rank 1 warrior academy here. Um it's pretty focused, it's very strategic, it's very structured, so there's not really much guessing involved in what you can do. And of course, if you do get it confused, you know, if you have too many options or you don't know what to do, you know, this is what the academy is about, right? Drop your questions, you know, ask for help, reach out to other warriors. Like everyone here is going down the same journey. Everyone here has to make choices every single day, right? We're all constantly making choices. So if we can kind of align those choices with things that are going to help you, you know, prevent those feelings from occurring in the future, right? Then that could be a huge, huge motivator. And then we can discover down the road other forms of motivation, something more positive, for example, um, that can fuel the journey a little bit more, instead of just solely running on negative feelings and trying to escape or avoid it, in my opinion, I don't think that's a healthy, sustainable way to approach health and fitness, because there's just so many positive benefits that I think outweigh the negative risks, so to speak. But initially, I think again, turning that negative energy into motivation, I think is a valuable resource. And I give the example, this might be a little bit too nerdy, but I give the example of Dragon Ball. So if you watch Dragon Ball, like the anime, um, they were able to fight for the the people that they love, right? And achieve levels of power beyond their comprehension because of the negative feeling, the negative risk of an enemy coming to, basically kill the people they love, right? So they were willing to train, they were willing to fight, they were willing to do whatever it takes to prevent that from happening. So that's an example of like something negative that drove action, right? For them to make the choice is that risk of like, oh my God, this could happen. I need to take action now. So um, I hope that helps. Let me know if that helps. Although you mentioned I have very similar reason. I don't want to succumb to preventable diseases. I also want to be happy with myself plus comfortable in my own skin. Then I know that taking steps in the academy will lower those health risks for me and will help me feel stronger and more confident. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And see, it's like it's a like a double-edged sword that you're wielding in combat, right? Because at the end of the day, we have to be fighting for something, right? And that doesn't mean that what we're fighting for has to only be positive or only be negative. It could be a combination of both, right? There's two sides to the sword, so to speak. So, it's really finding your why. Your why is is one of the major things when it comes to motivation. And again, this we're just believe it or not, we only peeled back only some of the layers. We can go much, much more deep when it comes to motivation, and all its components and stuff like that. But this is really more about perspective shifting when it comes to what it is on how it works, rather than getting into um, deeper, more complex things of generating it. Because if you don't fully understand the surface level aspect of motivation, then all of the other intricacies aren't going to be sustainable. Um, and it's just going to be one of those things that the value of it becomes diminished, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I highly recommend diving into high performance habits. Brendan Burchard, maybe even jumping straight into the chapter of motivation. Um, that might help out tremendously as far as starting to peel back more of those layers a little bit more deeply. But I also recommend possibly re-listening to this recording. This it's hard to get things first time, sometimes re-listening and relearning and just getting re-exposed to it a second time and a third, even possibly a third time, can really start to sit, and there might be better understanding. But um probably one of the biggest things to know that it's a lot one of those stoic principles of we don't control of what happens to us, but we control how we respond. It's that response that's a a path motivation, and how you generate that individually is different from everybody. So, but I could tell you one way of doing that is your why. You know, the real reasons why. You can get into passion, you get into purpose, you can get into all these different things when you go into that discussion of your why. But you know, you can kind of boil it down to those positive and negative feelings that you either feel now or are trying to acquire or avoid in the future. So awesome. Danny said y'all started. Awesome. It is one of my top five favorite books of all time. Um, yeah, I've read it so many times. So I know it will help give you some more clarity on motivation. And yeah, of course, keep me posted, keep everyone posted on your progress here. We're here to support you. Um yeah, let us know how we can support you further. Definitely here for you. All of us are. And all you warriors here, motivation and discipline starts with you guys showing up, right? So applaud yourself for doing that and also sticking with me for damn near an hour here. Um, it's an important topic. It can literally make or break your progress here inside the academy. So it's so important to me that we talk about this important skill sets. And it starts with, again, the choices that we make on a daily basis. Remember, today plus today equals your goals, right? Our daily habits culminate into the bigger picture that we paint of ourselves. So focus on what you can do today. And you've already done one of the best things that you could do today, and that's show up to this call and sit here and learn, ask questions, and all of those things. So you have motivation, you have discipline. It's now being able to master it and go down that path of mastery so that you can develop these skill sets because motivation and discipline, both wielded in combat, both of these swords can apply to every aspect of your life. It can completely transform your life if you can sharpen these skills. So I hope I can at least open up the path for you all to explore that much more deeply and to master it. So all that being said, shout out to all you warriors here, also warriors watching and recording. As always, this is your master wizard Walt here by your side as your guide on your Infinite Academy adventure. Don't stop asking me questions. Ask me as much questions as you want, warriors. And I'll see you next week and inside the Discord as well. Dominate and conquer the rest of your day. See ya.